Hi, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to this live session. I'm Esther Martinez, CEO and Editor in Chief at People Matters, and I'm going to be hosting this conversation for all of you today. And as you keep joining in, you will see that on the right side, you have the comments box, and it will be lovely if you let us know where all are you joining us from. And as you join in the conversation, this is a live session, so we're going to get the opportunity to hear our expert, but also to learn from you, to interact with you, and to get your questions live. So feel free to just kind of quickly introduce yourself and let us know where are you joining us from. So today's session is going to be focusing on our research, HR Evolution Perspectives 2023. And it's a research we did with Darwinbox team. And we're going to go deeper specifically for the India audience. And we're going to do a similar session soon for our Southeast Asia community. But today we will focus a little bit more about the implications of the insights for our community in India. So let me start by highlighting that, of course, our world of work, our function is being disrupted by technology. There's a lot of things happening, and there is a huge opportunity that we have as well as a community to be able to take these disruptions and apply them into our organization. So People Matters and Darwinbox gather responses from over 2,000 HR practitioners and more than 1,200 employees, and we were able to put together Asia's largest specific research on HR transformation, and we call it the HR Evolution Perspectives 2023, Empower and Evolve. And it's the largest study of its kind in the region, and we believe that the trends and the insights from the report are going to give you a lot of deep insights, but also a roadmap on how do you take that data and really benchmark your own organization and look at designing the way forward. So today we have the privilege to have with us Shashwat Kumar, Senior Vice President, Global Customer Success and Delivery at Darwinbox. Very warm welcome, Shashwat.
Hi, Esther. Good afternoon. Great to be here and talking about this topic with you.
Thank you so much.
And a big thank you for the partnership on this research. Look
Thank you
forward
so
to
much.
many years of this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shashwat, and good afternoon to you too. Uh, Shashwat needs no introduction. He's been part of a lot of our initiatives, and he leads, for the last 2 decades, he leads multi-geographical, multicultural experiences, and he works with organizations around the world, supporting them in their HR digital transformation process. And he's been at the forefront of multiple shifts in the HR as a function. And today at Darwinbox, he helps accelerate the drive to value realization for large and medium enterprise customers. And he's a trusted advisor of more than 600 customers now at Darwinbox and accelerating the company's global expansion. So we're really looking forward to our session today. We're going to have 2 parts. We've requested Shashwat to take us through some of the key highlights of the research, and he's going to do that first. And then we quickly will move into a specific Q&A, and there I'm going to really invite you, as you hear Shashwat's insights of the report, to bring your questions as you go along. So over to you, Shashwat.
Yeah. Thank you, Esther. I will keep this brief so that we get enough time for the discussion. And I will request audience to download the report to get more details because that's something worth reading. As you said, this is already in its first year, the largest study of its kind. I will move on there. The first large insight, if you look at the initial section, is how do you look at the demand coming to HR and responding to that? And if you think of HR as a function, what we see as demand is coming from two different stakeholders, big stakeholders. If you think of business as a stakeholder and employee population as another stakeholder, and at times these demands also has some inherent challenges and conflict in there. So just quick couple of minutes on that. When it comes to business leaders, uh, I think disproportionate focus in the region, India, Southeast Asia, all of Asia, Middle East, is growth, and it's growth through all the lenses: growth of revenue, growth of profitability, organic growth, M&A growth. So organic, inorganic. But if you look at the data, the other interpretation is there is a demand to grow, but there is also a demand to be more productive. So the whole notion of reckless growth is no more there, clearly. Even when expectation is very high growth, people are looking for improved profitability, which talks about productivity. And it also reflects in multiple other areas of the study. The final one, which is a very strong one, is ESG. Come to think of it, people in APA, across Asia Pacific, at least in the emerging or developing economies, would not have talked about ESG as a top level item. It has not only come in, it has come in very strong, also reflects the larger narrative in our society. If you think of India itself, there is so much talk and media coverage around pollution, climate change, focus on renewals, and so on. It's but natural that corporates are now putting that as a top theme. Now, this is interesting because if you look at India specific as a region, and if you think of CXOs and their view of the big risk which will hold them back and likelihood of that happening, things around capability, critical roles, leadership has been a big concern for over last 10, 15, 20 years because companies have been growing fast. Now if you look at, there are nuance coming in. How do we create, or how do we tackle house? So how do we create an organization which is ready to be more agile? How do we deliver experience? How do we get ready to innovate with business models faster? So lot of concern around how aspects, which also talks about the whole theme, and which why it became so strong, the whole experience, agility, and so on. So this is clearly a very strong demand coming in. And now if you think of this demand, fundamentally it's going back to the basics. So leaders are saying I need more capability, and maybe I need it in different forms because businesses will adjust faster, so we'll change direction and so on. So that's one. Second is also the nature of that capability. You can define it differently. Cultural, the softer aspects, so how it collaborates, how it works together, the agility of the organization itself, that's also coming in as a demand. uh, Now, if we move to the employee side, and this to me was super interesting, some of the themes have carried forward. So, think around work life remains a top issue, and clearly, flexible work environment is different from work life, and there is now a lot of people going back, and expectation in even the employee segment is settled in. It's not about all flexibility; it's also about doing other things and so on. The good leaders and the brand impact of good leaders, I think, will only increase going forward. And the whole idea of I need purpose in work, and that's very much there. But the things which are actually, if you look at the next 3 4 items, because these are also top items, more than 40% and so on, pay and benefits have come together very strongly. So if you look at my own experience, especially in India, while at times you later on leave, when you switch jobs, you realize you get paid a lot more because there is this whole inflation in the market and talent supply demand dynamics and so on. But pay and benefits on its own were not the top item ever. Having done years of best employers research in my previous work and so on, across all engagement studies and all, if you look at it across different providers, it's always career learning which are the bigger ones than pay and benefits. Pay and benefits coming in the top items. I think it's a, how do you demonstrate it, and how do you also define more internal equity? I think it will put even more lens on the internal equity. But the big flip is, I look forward to a place of work which is fun, to looking at employers and their investment in digital tooling. I think this is a big switch. Fancy office, I think still you will need great offices, because those will become more collaborative workspaces for colleagues to come in time and work together, do something, build connects, and so on. But that on its own is no more the solve. So now they are saying, how do you now translate that with also on the digital front? So that's a big change. I will not take time, move to the next piece, and that's where, if you think of demand around softer aspects, how do you think of the softer aspects? And that's where, as we constructed this research, Esther, if you go back between our two teams, it's very clear that both agility and experience are the big themes. And that's what even the business demand and the employee side is reflecting. And how do you bring it together? So if you think of bringing that together, obviously you can go very complex with that, but we actually thought of these 8 pillars. So how HR really delivers value is uh, focus on business outcomes, think of the efficient delivery mechanism around that, optimal technology, robust governance, which is looking at data and going back, making changes so that your programs and processes and policies are getting recalibrated to deliver outcome. If it's not working, it's a kind of getting corrected. If it's working, it's getting amplified, and so on. As you think of workforce experiences, obviously it gets delivered through multiple of hard channels, processes, workplace environment, interactions with leaders, their capability, and so on. But fundamentally experience comes back and ties into an emotional connect, whether it's around empathy, trust, transparency, or support. So those became the 4 pillars there. And we went out and asked our respondents to kind of respond where they are, how they are doing, and so on. And that's where the next round of insights. This is something delving deeper and worth looking at as the audience reads through the report. The segmentation was laggards are organizations who have not really thought through 2 pieces, the whole service delivery, because large part of both experience and agility comes from a focus on how do you execute and deliver, and the technology, and both in sync. Leaders are the ones who have done it well, and outliers are the one who have not only done it well but are actually super happy with that, which means they have executed well on that. And that's really important, because you can choose different strategy points. We are not differentiating one strategy versus others. Obviously your effort needed on different strategy choices you make will be different, but there is an opportunity to excel if you have a discipline of execution. So that's where the data is. The other big highlight is that when you execute well, so you have an tech and operating model strategy which is in sync, and you execute with discipline behind that, you tend to do extremely well on all fronts. It's intuitive now that you look at data in hindsight, not otherwise, because essentially when you are in control of your life as an HR function, you have way more ability to be outside in, because your house is not on fire. Any other situation, when your house is on fire, you get pulled down to the lowest level, and hence your ability to deliver on elevated outcomes and expectations actually just goes out of the window. And this theme carries through if you go to the next aspect. So if you look at it, what business leaders are asking from HR, from an expectation and the outcomes which are important to them, there literally is a 2x difference between even a laggard and leader. Outliers are obviously doing way better, and the key is the pattern is consistent. You tend to deliver at a similar level. So one way to look at the research is that which outcomes some companies overall are doing, which outcomes they are not doing well, is there a systemic gap in HR, and so on. But if you look at the larger pattern here, it's not that. It's the fact that when you actually are in control of things internally in HR, you can predict outcomes. That's when you also have freed up bandwidth to actually do more things with your external stakeholders, whether it's business, society, employees, and so on. And that's the key theme which repeats everywhere. If you go to the hallmarks of agility, you will see the same pattern repeating, and it's super important. And that's where a lot of times clients today, or in my previous life, will say, I want to build talent marketplace. Great thing to do, but there is a journey to building talent marketplace. You need your Digital, you need your ops, you need your jobs data, you need your skill data to come together. You need to have the science of competency working, and then you execute. In past, you may be doing setting up all of that manually. Today, digital will do. In future, AI will help you, but the journey steps will remain the same. And there is no point leapfrogging, because suddenly you will realize you have no data and you will get pulled to the bottom. And that's where I think it's important to understand the value of getting the whole basics right and executing well, because then you have the opportunity to do all other aspects of HR and the business outcomes. And why I'm super emphasizing it, that because from a thinking perspective, businesses have already placed HCM outcomes front and center. I'm not, and that's where I'm differentiating. I'm not saying HR front and center. Human capital outcomes are front and center for business leaders. And that's where the opportunity, as we get the HR discipline right, we will deliver on the HCM outcomes. And this is the same theme coming through as you look at all the respondents versus leaders, including HR leaders. You will see the whole ramp up of demand around capability, around mobility, about cultural alignment of business. So it's getting added to the other basic demands. So it's not to say that the basics are going to deliver all these elevated demands. It's assumed that you would have done the basics right. Some bits around experiences, and here I will not take too much time. It's, we said that because there is so much talk about demographic differences, we'll go and capture the detail, and this is directly being captured from employees. So it's a great way to look at and check through other insights coming through the program. And but when you look at the detail again, the key thing here is everyone is looking for experience, irrespective of which demographics you belong to. It's not about the differences within that. You will have to obviously cater to some differences in persona, but everyone wants a better experience today. And in fact, I will pinch this idea or the nice phrasing from one of the CHROs we connected, Esther, on the interview. And this is the way they look at it. They say that everyone needs purpose and fulfillment. Now the path, the channel, and the patience around it is different, depending on the different context you came to work in and you started your careers and so on. So it was really well put. So I will just take that and share that. So this is something I learned through this research experience. Obviously the whole NPS on tech remains poor. The average is between 9 to 12%. But the thing to look at it is between leaders and laggards. Leaders are at 30%, which is good number, because the market generally, the NPS even for best of platforms is at 15, 18%. Uh, the other way to look at it is leaders are also the most demanding lot. So they are obviously pushing the envelope. Laggards are very low. And when you put it in the lens of talent outcomes and talent management programs, the average dips further, which means that there is a lot more catch up to happen when it comes from execution of technology pieces. It's not, I think there are enough people buying. We are experiencing it. Our competitors are experiencing it. And maybe there is enough mis-selling happening that reflects in poor NPS. So buying time expectations versus what gets realized. But the other piece is also the discipline of execution needs to improve. The dominant strategy when it comes to tech is moving clearly away from best of breed. But also unify will be a tough one to execute, because there is enough business complexity to say that I will unify everything into one. Think unifying payroll across geographies, think unifying everything. And the thing is, as you consolidate, you will realize that there are certain areas where you want to be edgy, you want to experiment with new themes. So you should look at opportunities with your partners. How do you allow for those experimentations? So the bulk of consolidation means that bulk of the platform will come together. For very unique use cases, you will have some standalone tools. And I think all enterprises, as they become more stable on their platform, they will experiment more with emerging digital tools, because those experiments will increase at pace. And that's the opportunity. Obviously, if you look at the buying items, data analytics, user experiences are the big ones. Domain knowledge and all those are equally important, but I think experience and data capabilities are the two big ones which will come through. And data capability really connects to talent outcomes, because how do you demonstrate outcomes is through the data. And so that's where, think of three pillars of outcomes, experience, and analytics as you evaluate platforms. uh, this goes back to the, and this reflects in the NPS. If you look at hype, we continue to talk about newer hype items. But if you look at some of the, even the hygiene items today, if you look at employee listening becoming real, learning being video based, 100% self-service empowerment, so that you can literally do all processes on on your own or mobile, 100% mobile access of a platform. Even these are happening at a very low percentage levels. But there is so much hype if you look at in events, in the media around the right side items. I think it's great to look forward, but unless and until you get the hygiene right items 100% right, we don't have a right to talk and execute on hype. It's as maybe a more direct way of looking at it. uh, uh, this we talked through, how do we succeed through the journey. It's going back to the basics. How do you plan for success with intention? So if it's a transformation program, call it transformation. If it's just a platform replacement, call it platform replacement. Let's do not confuse the two. If you are saying you are automating, it's automating, versus digital, where you are changing the way of doing things for an outcomes. Great organizations will not look at business case, will look at values. Not saying they will not do TCO, they will do TCO, but then they will say, show me the upside. The difference is, business case will look at an HR expense, and HR expense is zero point 0.5, definitely on all cases less than 1% of your revenue. It's zero point 0.5. Value case is HR's impact on the all of the P&L itself. So a lot of organizations will start asking for value cases, because HCM is becoming HCM outcomes are a CEO agenda. Execute with expertise. And my experiences of 22, 23 years, most successful clients I had they were the most arrogant clients or ambitious clients in their vision. It's very interesting. But they were the humblest clients when it came to execution. Really, literally willing to work like rats, accepting the fact that things will go wrong, things will change, we will adjust. So they were in the trenches executing, and these clients really transformed themselves at pace. So that's where execution is the key to realize whatever you have kind of defined as value. And finally, go live is just a milestone. So how do you, in a SaaS world, think of ongoing project DNA? And that goes back to the DNA of HR function. Think of breaking the functional silos, doing collaborating more, and getting into an ongoing project mindset. With that, I will kind of stop and think of this as empower and evolve. You are empowering the employees. Ability to evolve faster brings agility to the organization overall. So that's it from my side, Esther. I hope I did not take too much time.
Yeah,
I
no
could not
worries.
go any faster. I was already fast.
No worries, Shashat. It was worth every minute, and I'm taking so much notes as I hear you. Because I find that, as a leader, you always call a spade, and you always bring a very, very provocative message, underpinned with data and underpinned with your tremendous experience. But at the end of the day, I really love the fact that you've been able to take the data, build a story, but also being provocative with your message. So I'm going to start with my first question related to your invitation, actually, on helping us keep the house in order, saying that's really going to build the bandwidth, is going to give us the freedom to really adapt to the needs of the two demands. Actually, you talk about the two demands very beautifully, um, uh, uh, beautifully as a metaphor. I can see that as a demand, and some of the times conflicting demands. Now, my question is, when we're looking at India specifically, and we are looking at defining that, I would say, winning formula, but maybe going back to your invitation of keeping the house in order. And you have already showed us in the last slide, be clear with your intention, make sure that you're looking at the value that this initiative or whatever intention is going to bring to the business, be arrogant on vision, but humble on execution, and also really thinking of go live as a starting point. So you've already given us that map.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to take that map into the India context and you were to help us define that, what is the, again, going back to the winning formula, especially in the India context that you know really, really well, and especially having worked already with some of those leaders, what can we learn from organizations that have done it well?
So India, I will say, is a high pressure HR because the transaction load is high. Think of high attrition in frontline, and think of obviously high growth. So the moment you create that transaction load, you have created a high pressure situation, and you have actually created a platform to reduce collaboration. So fundamentally, I will go back and how do you get the intended operating model? So in India, if you look at it, most organizations, and this is interesting, more outside India, a lot of Asia started way later than India when it came to, because the management practices in India historically have been mature, talking back to our education system and a lot of those history. So we have actually constructed, if you look at most medium or large organization, HR roles, and really the intent is right. But if you look at and you start unpeeling, you will realize the roles are not delivering what's expected there. So there will always be talk about HRBPs not being strategic enough. COE is not delivering to the agenda, or not being kind of agile enough on the ball, and so on. HR ops on the challenge. So what has happened is that in execution somewhere there is a lot of suboptimal pieces, and this happens globally. In India, this is amplified because of the transaction load. So what happens is all the roles are in some way getting pulled into operations. There is enough fire grievances happening where HRBPs are stepping down to do that. COEs is getting involved in administering programs, then monitoring the success of it. HR ops is obviously dying with the whole volume and load and so on. So there is a need to kind of step back and integrate and clean up. So literally the success where the digital needs to take this mess out from each of the role holders.
Yeah.
So think of it, how do you free up HRBP's time to do more talent discussion with the business itself? Can we provide COE data to say COE looks at data and says whether programs are delivering the desired outcomes? If not, how do we talk together? Similarly, how does HR ops then publishes data to drive this? And also HR ops is more becoming more thinking shrinking from a volume perspective, because HR ops historically itself was 40%. If you look at the transaction load in other roles, literally the reality of HR ops was 50-60%. So how do you shrink that so that you free up bandwidth for more employee relations role, where you go and talk to employees on cultural support aspects? There is generally more stretch. So how do you take care of health, well-being, and all of that? So new roles which are more employee touch, employee connects, you need to create that, because business is not going to give you more budget.
Yeah.
So how does that happen? And the moment that happens is reality is you can do way more with the lesser cost, because you have shrunk the whole operations, and it's a better high quality operations,
Yeah.
and you do more of higher value stuff. Employees or businesses feel more empowered, but
Yeah.
you have guaranteed compliance, because compliances are delivered on the back end with controls in place. So that's how the switch looks like. And the key is to start collaborating more with data, because how do you get this whole collaboration and speed of collaboration going on in HR is the big one. And historically, everywhere it's a challenge, because we have looked in HR more at things with a functional lens
Yeah.
than with an outcome lens. So all the outcomes which businesses are asking for are horizontal, which cuts across multiple functional pillars. But historically, we have always looked at HR outcomes from a functional lens, and that's the behavior change needed.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashwat. I'm going to jump into one question from the audience. So Pramod is asking, when you were referring specifically about being in control and actually setting that intention and really being driving, are you referring about HR driving that control, or business leadership has also a role to play?
So Pramod, great question. And this question I get asked a lot of time, especially given the HR transformation background.
Yeah,
That is it for us to take, or we need permission to get it? But it's actually a little bit of both. So we need to demonstrate readiness at the current level of doing things. So, for example, think of it. How do you do a career growth conversation? You need to be super good at what you are doing today to even have a right to demand the next level. So, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it, through the COVID challenges, HR anyhow got connected to all the leaders, board members, and so on. So today, if you look at HR leaders, they have way more connects with the uh, business leadership, stakeholder groups than they had even 2 3 years back. And HCM has become central because all the digital programs over 10 15 years are getting thrashed for under delivering on value. And when you kind of question why they are under delivering on value, it's org, people, behavior, job, capability. Think of a finance transformation, supply chain, procurement, any of those transformation. So there is this whole pressure point around human capital change needed to succeed with the larger business agenda. So you need both. So you need to gain the confidence by kind of enabling a lot of these org change pieces, because each of these programs will succeed when org change happens, and HR needs to kind of help with that. And when that org change happens multiple times, I think it's natural step into delivering business outcomes. I don't think there is a need of asking for it. There is a need of making that happen, because there is today no one making it happen.
yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Shashwat. And I'm staying with the audience because now there is a question on the other side. So you're talking about demands from the business and how we need to make it happen. The other demand is from a employee preference. And Rashmi is asking, employee preferences are constantly evolving. And we saw a slide on the different generational data points. So what are some points to focus on in the coming year from an employee experience standpoint?
So I think as an org, if you come to think of it, I think experience, both promise and delivery, cannot be momentary. So and Rasmi, the question itself is an awesome question, but the way to look at it is step back and say what is the true org and the commitment we are talking here. And experience is not new. This used to be what used to be called employer branding in 2000. That's where 99 2000 2001 came. That's where the first science around moments and all that came. Today technology allows you to deliver it at scale and make it all pervasive. And experience itself is not on technology, it's happening offline. Technology can sense it, support you, and so on. So now, come to think of it, uh, the promise and the actual experience needs to align. And that's where, while ideally, when you look at the market average, employees will demand something. But the question is, how do we deliver? Obviously, all organizations will have to deliver some sense of purpose.
Yeah,
We'll have to demonstrate the quality of leadership, management, and so on to make it happen. But it's something like work life flexibility, everyone can demonstrate? No. A lot of people will say that it's full time work because it's shift working. So that means that you will have to narrow down your talent segmentation from a pipeline perspective. So be very clear and not decide not to choose certain talent who have that as a top agenda, and not something else, because you cannot deliver to that promise. If you look at Darwinbox as a company which has a stated agenda and the milestones out in the public domain, we are all about still retaining our startup DNA. Someone like us cannot promise work life because we are about a high stretch.
Yeah.
So and we obviously support you with everything because diversity is important to us. So but and hence how do you segment and that for both male or female colleagues or potential candidates who are looking at work life as a top driver, maybe we are not the right choice for them. But people who are out there to make a dent in the universe, do something which is life changing, and are willing to take that stretch over next 5 10 years,
Yeah.
we are the most empowering organization to come to. But the moment you have made that choice, you have made the whole hurdle to hire tougher for yourself.
Yeah.
But that's needed. If you don't do that, attrition will come back and hit you. So how do you build that discipline and start differentiating? That will be a big one. But there is no easy answer. You can do tweak the given the market conditions, because market conditions will amplify the pressures or reduce the pressure.
Yeah.
But your core promise and the related experience should connect to who we are as an organization,
Yeah.
and that will force us to do talent segmentation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as I hear you, Shashwat, it just requires that clarity, but also the courage to say, well, maybe we are not for you. And I think as an organization, most organizations have that challenge, because you're kind of reducing your talent pool, but you realize that actually it's creating much bigger cultural challenges, retention
Yeah,
challenges, and so on and so forth. So I think it's the clarity plus the courage to really be consistent, and
yeah.
say this is what we stand for.
Yeah, very well put. Because for all the pain businesses will give us on attrition later on, at that
Correct.
point they will say these candidates are great. I have a business need to meet. I need
Exactly.
to them to be productive on
Exactly.
in their seat in 3 months. Let's do it.
Correct.
I think how do you balance that out is super important. So
Yeah.
great point, Esther.
Thank you so much for that. Great. So I'm going to continue with our question, and then I'm going to go back. There's some more questions from the audience, but bring them, keep them bringing. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, Shashwat, was about the HR transformation, setting the intent, and I think I see that also as a big challenge for us in the community, and because we start with an intent, but then we also get ambitious that okay, now that we're doing this, now let's, and the intent actually keeps evolving, naturally so, but then we end up with kind of like a kitchery that starts then becoming the challenge. Okay, now that we're doing this automation process, why don't we actually also transform this, and why don't we also, or now that we're doing the replacement of our technology, why don't we also, so help us a little bit understanding, in your experience, how do we set the intent well? What are some of the approaches or lenses or, I don't know, watch outs, so then we can set the intent, because that was your starting point. You have the
Yeah,
intent clear,
yeah, yeah.
everything else will follow.
So it can be very complex. So I've been a consultant, so you can
I,
do a very complex listening exercise with a consultant and pay them a lot of money. But the other way to look at it is go back to your most important stakeholders.
yeah,
Think of what are the three things they will want to change from an HR perspective, and what are the three things they will not want to change. Because all organizations have some good stuff which is valuable to carry forward. With business leaders, also project out 3 years later what are the three strong things which will help them succeed, which ideally HR should think of. So just think of these three.
yeah,
Talk to your 10 business leaders. You will already know
yeah,
what needs to improve, what needs to be retained. How do you pick up an agenda to say, how do we demonstrate value 3 years out? And similarly, if you look at employee listening, we generally end up getting all inputs, but we then tend to pick or choose the easy ones because the tough ones are tough ones. Because not happy with performance, I don't trust the transparency of performance. It's not a performance change, it's a manager capability change.
yeah,
So how do you go about doing that? It becomes a whole org change piece. So most of the feedback from employees will go back, and you will start realizing connects to a lot of org change pieces. So today, if you start taking these two as the background canvas, and that's where I am also looking at other question from Ruchika,
yeah,
is how do you start?
yeah,
Then
yeah,
wherever you are in the journey,
yeah,
then you have to think of three things. One is how do you think of a combined operating model? When I say combined operating model, do not think of tech, ops, and HR operating model or HR pillars separately. because work happens through a series of steps. And in past, a lot of this was manual. Today, all of it can be automated, and it intersects all the HR roles together, and then there is an outcome. So, how do you combine it together with a future view? You will realize you have changed the role of multiple roles in HR because you have taken out manual stuff. Then, obviously, you can fill it up with other things. So, that's one way to look at it. As you do that, be very clear about how do you measure success of that, which is the whole data view. And why I'm saying that, even in the beginning of design, do not wait for tools or go live to happen to collect data. Start collecting it now, because the bigger change in HR or success of HR transformation is habit of working with data.
Yeah.
So whether my recruitment is failing because of pipeline funnel not being right, assessment quality not being right, which could go back to your job description not being right, or time from business leaders or hiring managers taking too long. So my time to interview candidate is taking long, or engagement post offer is a challenge. Even today, without tools, you can collect the data.
Yeah.
So the habit of coming together with data and saying, how do we problem solve, will do two things. You will have a baseline so that you know how do you improve post your digital go live, and how do you kind of demonstrate value to everyone who comes to you and asks for what's the ROI on the initiative. That's one way to look at it. The second way to look at it is, this practice will get the HR leaders ready whenever your go live happens to drive this change through a collaborative model even more frequently, because that's truly the agile model of HR. It's not about creating new roles, creating squads, tribes. Those are fancy jargons, but the basic way to making a HR agile is to start working with data, challenging what's the problem, building some models to say this is a potential hypothesis, to say why this problem, what could be the solution, deploying it, coming back a month, 2 months later, look at data again and doing it again. So that waiting for it post go live, we will realize we have not built this new muscle to do this.
Yeah.
So that muscle building in HR is a bigger habit change, takes longer, and hence it's worth starting day one.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think we've kind of covered some parts of Ruchika's question.
Yeah,
But I think the second element, saying when we don't even have any tech, like imagine that even the question is right, reading it for everyone's interest. So how do laggards start from the foundation? You've given us some insight from an intention and value creation, and kind of like the behavior change. If you can help us identify the tech layer as well, because there is
yeah,
some part of choosing the right partner, and also, as you said, the discipline on the
yeah,
humility in discipline, and
yeah.
then the go life part is only the beginning. So just
So,
go
and
back in the context of laggards in
yeah,
particular.
so Esther, I talked about the journey per se. So
Yeah,
it's interesting. If you're a laggard, you can beat yourself down, but it's also an opportunity. Think of it this way: leapfrogging tech is always easier when you have very low history. So India went from very low volume of landline to mobile directly. Now, for countries where there was huge infra and investment with 100% landline coverage, for them going to mobile was tougher, because look at
yeah,
the investment which has already gone in. So in many ways, brownfield is tougher than a pure greenfield.
yeah,
So that's one way to look at it. But
yeah,
the sequence will be same. The second piece is, do not try to challenge the logic of the sequence. There is a build-up sequence, Esther, you are referring to.
yeah,
You will need to get your core together. So think
yeah,
of your core and employee services. So
yeah,
ideally, core HR, which takes care of transactions. So assume leave attendance, maybe recruitment, payroll, benefits, together with something equivalent to a help desk and HR document management. If that goes together, it takes care of all transactions. It takes care, because these are transaction heavy pieces. It starts creating data insights for you from workforce analytics and so on. Then you start building the talent pieces or engagement pieces. So talent pieces is the whole piece around, think of performance, think succession, think competency, think skills match, because that will need few years of data in mid-sized company.
Yeah.
18 months plus of data in a large size company to say that you can start making sense of it. A lot of AI will only work when you have that volume of transaction data transacted through. Then you can also make the skill match, talent match work. And then you can actually go and say, okay, we can start looking at elements of talent marketplaces. But saying that, okay, get me talent marketplace today and it will solve. You have bought an expensive tool and you will end up using it as a job board. So that's the hierarchy. Similarly, on engagement, I can listen to employees all the time I want to do. So today, Darwinbox has built a whole layer where you can actually pick up any moments and listen. You can trigger notification, do custom workflow. Longer term, AI will build intent. So you have created a canvas for experience. But a lot of clients, when today we talk, they say, "Oh, give us this layer directly." But the problem is listening is easy, but what you will do post that is a bigger challenge, because experience is an ongoing discipline.
Yeah.
So if I listen, I need to take action, I need to trigger something, I need to then listen again, measure again, and so on. And hence, people who will have the basics in place will tend to do it way better, because then you will actually make it credible, because when employees see that they gave feedback, something happened, they trust it more, and so on. I hope that I have answered both
Yeah.
parts of Ruchika's question.
Totally, totally. So I'm gonna move forward to two things I want to cover, but we had missed one question from Kamna Goyal. And I think I'm connecting that question to your comment before that the CHRO during the study mentions everyone needs purpose and fulfillment across generations. And I think that somewhere connects with her question, saying that when we're talking about creating that safe space, one of the elements is about providing opportunities for people to fail. And that's intrinsic to, as you said, agility and trying things, measuring it, improving it. But again, how do we practically implement it?
Yeah. So but this is in public domain. So let me give credit, Esther. I realize it's a interview already live on People Matters platform.
Yes.
This is Prashad Krishna from Flipkart who
Oh,
talked about it,
awesome.
and they have done years on this. So I
Yeah.
think yeah. So as you two way. So purpose and fulfillment.
Yeah.
Now it's simple in a way. We
Correct.
want meaningful work. So a
Yeah.
lot of people will say purpose is about changing. It's easy for some organizations. So for example, if you are an ISRO and you are sending rockets to the moon, it's easy to define a purpose. It's
Yeah.
easy to define a purpose. You are doing something around nation building.
Yeah.
Now as you come to more mundane things, how do you define purpose?
Yeah.
I think that's where we'll have to connect to what the organization is doing and why you are doing that. So, and then that's where, if you look at it, one of the strongest connect of a purpose is the performance conversation and the goal setting.
Yeah.
We talk too much about what, we talk very little about why.
Yeah.
So, if you think of that cascade down to the last person, even if you are selling a simple consumer goods in the market and you are an salesperson on ground, or say think someone selling some medicine there, I think there is a purpose when the person understands that when you meet this volume, how it rolls up, how the business itself meets the overall goal. Not only business does better, price go up, all the stakeholders benefit, but also you create a pool to invest more in new research. So that understanding versus saying I need to do my quota only, but how does my quota helps meet the larger thing, is a way to look at it. How do we engage with employees? How do we establish purpose? Obviously there is a purpose when we go out and help a charity. There is a purpose, but that's external. Also, how do you create purpose and fulfillment in the core work we do is a lot about explaining the why of what's expected of you. And that's super important, and that we typically always underdo, because by the time you do goal setting, we are already couple of months into the cycle. It's running late, so you don't have time or energy to get into the why of it. But that might be more important than the what of any target.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm getting a lot of questions, Ashwat. So I'm prioritizing the audience questions with your permission, even though they may not necessarily connect with each other. So my apologies for that, but I want to make sure we have time for them. So we've got two questions. One is on employee agility. And the other question is about HCM implementation. Which one do you want to take first?
Let's go with the employee agility piece
All right.
because
All right.
that's the tougher one.
So Ranjan's question is, can you explain how employee agility is affecting other HR practices in the organization? Let's go with that.
Not sure whether Ranjan is questioning this around HR employee agility, or it's questioning around the larger employee and the org agility.
Mm,
So if it's HR's agility,
yeah,
if HR is not collaborating across functions, businesses will not see outcome. So for example, a low collaborate HR which is not working with data, not collaborating well,
yeah,
typically feedback will be that HRBPs are ineffective.
yep,
Same HRBP put the person in a different context where HR is collaborating well. We are feeding data to HRBP. As HRBP goes and talks to business and all, the feedback will be I have a great HRBP.
yeah,
So think of it, the collaboration in HR makes overall impact bigger than the parts.
yep,
And that's where this agility and ability to collaborate on outcomes beyond your job is super important. Now, the other lens, which is employee agility, is the bigger question,
yep,
because agility of employees, individual level happens through, I will say, how do you create uh, empower, enable, and agile. So that's the only way to do it. You need to empower individuals, enable them. Only then they will demonstrate agile behavior. Today, all businesses are demanding org agility. Org agility is sum total of employee agility, which is multiple org changes. Obviously, there is this empower and enable for employees, which also means the whole manager and leader change. And companies have been doing it for years, but now increasingly the demand will be for HR to come step up and enable that. So that's the other lens. So I will stop because
yeah.
both can go to a very long conversation.
Thank you, Shashat, for that. So let's go with Pramod's question on what are leaders doing differently compared to laggards to ensure greater cultural adoption of HCM technology and value creation. And his comment is data shows the difference is actually very significant. So
Yeah,
what can we learn on what
and
are the leaders doing?
yeah, so Pramod, great question again. And if you
Yep,
go back to the question, it's not a new discipline.
yep,
And that's what I was pointing around, HR working with data and going back to problem solving. So having this problem solving mindset, having this collaborative mindset and working with data, that these three discipline is the most important one.
yep,
If you go back and look at the whole evolution of HR, there has been organizations who have been doing it even in the old world, the best of breed world. They did the plumbing to do this, but they had this discipline of looking at data every month and going back and talking through changes, even explaining to business why they are making a change, because you have data to do that talk. And you will go back and if you go back and open body of research in HR across different big orgs, you will find this theme emerge. People succeeded with leadership discipline because they had data to go back and demonstrate. When you don't follow the discipline, you promote the wrong behavior, people with wrong behaviors, it comes back and hurt you as an organization. So there is a bigger business downside of making a wrong choice. When that becomes clear, business steps back. So the big discipline in HR is the discipline of working with data, collaborating with data, problem solving with data. So that's one. But
yep,
the thing is, what do you solve for? That understanding has to be outside in. That understanding cannot be process and program driven. So, and why I am raising it is, if you think of leadership, leadership training is not the outcome. Managing critical roles is the outcome. Similarly, on performance and so on, when you actually kind of lock in those outcomes and then use data to provide more light, throw light on those outcomes,
yep,
I think we'll build the discipline to drive value. And also, all lot of other internal problems go away. Also, research shows that if you have to pick up one thing to drive behavior change and impact change, this is one thing you should do first.
yep. Yeah, wonderful. So I have one question I want to cover, and it was there in your last slide that you talk about the right side, and you call about the areas that are in hype, and you invited us to make sure that we have the foundation ready. My question is, at the same time, there seems to be a lot of speed on the hype side. And how do we make sure that we don't miss out on some things that could actually transform or exponentially change a lot more faster than what we had predicted? So it may be hype, but how fast would those technologies evolve? And
So
how do we? There's this a new concept I heard, Shashwat. I don't know if you heard it. It's fear of being obsolete. I think it's
yeah,
FOBO or something like that. It's a new terminology.
FOBO.
So yes, FOBO.
Okay, FOBO. So in fact, it's a great question, Esther. So step back and think of it. So uh, and historically, as an HR, if unlike other functions, if you go and say which is one best practice function in HR, one company, you will never find one company. And this has been researched many times and so on, because the nature of business and human capital will always demand, because then you will kind of create a talent strategy to match your business demand, which will mean that certain outcomes at certain point in time will be more important for you. So if you are a high growth organization, recruitment is way more important than a lot of other pieces in HR. And that's where, if you look at a lot of audience today, will say, oh, that's a big pain. But equally in India, in certain business contexts, something else will be more important. If you are a R&D heavy company and so on, something else will be more important. Now, the thing is, when you understand that very sharply, I think those areas will demand outlier behavior for you. And what happens when you look at outlier behavior, you need a full stack, and you will realize any great full stack will always pick up outlier behavior with lag, because nature of a full stack will mean you will be cautious around being edgy with your experiments. And that's where my comment on, when you are looking at consolidating, you also need a platform which allows you to experiment.
Yeah,
So that's where, then that in that specific area, you have a right to go out and experiment with edgier stuff, because that's where I think the buyer or the end user will agree to experiment with you. Because uh, if you're talking about outcomes, it's not only HR's mandate to experiment,
yeah,
because you are experimenting fundamentally on the employees.
yeah,
So how do you create a buy-in with employee and managers and business, is when you are doing something which is so close and important to a business outcome. They are saying, okay, let's be the guinea pig, go out and do that because it's important to us. We will work with HR and co-create this.
yeah.
I think, and I think that's where there is no need to be delayed on that. As you define outcomes, you will naturally realize these are the outcomes where we need to experiment the most. Let's
Yeah.
go ahead and do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for going back to. You're really taking us back to the fundamentals all the time, and I love how that message is so consistent across different lenses. So it doesn't really matter how we're looking at it, but it's just about solving for outside in challenges. And my last question, because we are gonna run out of time now, I want to make sure we have time. You already spoke to us about some of the, whether we call them skills or mindset shifts. I think you've already covered that. And you mentioned that those are not new. You talked about HR working with data, HR collaborating with data, solving with data, this whole data driven approach. Then you also talked about problem solving mindsets, and you also talked about collaborating or working with business in solutioning. Um, how do we build those critical skills? Because still the CHRO will say that maybe he or she at the CHRO level is actually able to display that, but a CHRO is as good as his own team. So if you're not able to build it in your at least in your next layer, your leadership team in HR, then probably you're not going to be effective as a CHRO. So how do we build that? I'm not going to ask you which skills because you've already answered them. I'm really keen on how can we enable the CHRO to actually accelerate
So
those skills and
two
mindsets.
answers: hire a big consulting firm. But the second answer, I think, is more real. Instead, it is just a matter of practice.
Yeah,
So let me take you through a couple of examples.
yeah,
too many times, if you go through an HR transformation and the whole digital part of the journey,
Yeah.
HR will talk about this is what we think business leader needs versus actually going and asking. And it's interesting whenever you go and ask, because business leaders are so intuitively interested in doing it.
Yeah.
Or they will actually give you the right answer. So that's one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second, I have had cases where we will talk about changes and then we'll say, oh, all these policies cannot change. Finance will not allow. IT will never think of it. We have never done it in 100 years of time.
Yeah.
And we said and insisted, why don't we have business leaders in the workshop co-creating
Yeah.
on things like performance, talent, recruitment? It was so interesting. Through the whole process,
Yeah.
CEO actually said, why do we need this policy?
Mm.
It's our right to change. Can we collapse it to something which is half page, simple to understand? We
Correct.
don't need this, and so on. So all that pain would go away. But the problem is this whole the habit of working in insulated form
Yeah.
is actually a long habit, and that's how historically organizations have worked. How do you break it is inviting more of, I will say, stakeholders in the
Yeah.
design phase itself. Because when you go back later on and show impact and justify a design, I think
Yeah.
it's already too late.
Yeah.
In the design aspect, just invite them in, and especially on anything to do with talent programs and talent outcomes. Also, maybe employee experience, because they are the first line to listen to the pain of employees.
Yeah.
So they intuitively will know and they value it. I think they will give awesome inputs mostly because they work with teams all the time, and those inputs will allow us to drive change. So you don't need an org change initiative. You have leaders who are bought into change and will be your change champions.
Yeah.
So that has always worked, Esther, but I am surprised and amazed every time. This is a tough conversation, that why it's important to include business wherever possible in these co-creating sessions. But generally the intent is not to do that. Intent will be not only this, even when data is ready, we'll say let's perfect the data before we open it up to business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? It's human capital is as much their problem as it's our problem. Look
Correct.
at data, will if there are gaps, we'll correct, because the more you see data,
Yeah.
there is a faster way of correcting it than
Yeah.
actually correcting it in the back end.
Yeah.
So I will stop here because this
Yeah.
goes back to core of HRT.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashrat. And I'm going to invite the team to on the chat, just give us access to the complete report. I think, and my maybe my final question would be, because you've worked in research, you really put a lot of effort designing and constructing this report along with the Darwinbox and the People Matters team. How do we use this report to extract maximum value? There's a huge effort of the last, I think, 4 or 5 months we were working on this. And how do we make sure when we download this report, how do you extract maximum? What will be your word of advice for us to say, this is how you use this report?
So a couple of things. So first is obviously go through the whole thing, understand it, spend time with it, because for someone just who has done for 2022 now 22 plus years HRT only, it still takes time, because when you read it second or third time,
Yeah.
you actually realize that there are different cuts to insights which you need to look at it.
Yeah.
Then second is put it into the your org context, uh, and both good, bad, ugly, all kinds of context is okay. And then the third is to go back and start saying what actions could happen,
Yeah.
which could start both from and two lens. Think of the business lens,
Yeah.
think of employee lens.
Yeah.
So if you think of business lens, what's the annual operating plan currently you have promised? Or go back and think, you may have a different scorecard. But what is the area where business is giving you maximum pain?
Yeah.
Actually, it's instead of ignoring, it's worth understanding why this pain is coming through.
Yeah.
What's the genesis of that, or what's the hidden fear? Because everything comes with a set of a belief.
Mm.
So if you come to think of it, when someone will say, "I cannot let go of a talent," it's very important to my team. It's
Yeah.
a fear or belief that there might not be sufficient talent in the firm itself. If I give someone up, can I get the person? The second belief is talent is not belonging to the firm. It's my talent. So similarly, when business is giving you pain on
Yeah.
multiple other aspects, understand the background to that. So that's one.
Yeah.
On employee listening, I think the basic thing, Esther, will be to start responding. If we cannot respond to listening and feedback, we should maybe listen less. But my take is that's not the right answer. The right answer
Correct.
is to respond more
Correct.
and start answering the why for employee, because that's important. Because why I'm saying this, going forward, the agility axis on org and the experience axis on employees will compound.
Yeah.
So I don't think this pain is going away next year or year after. This
Yeah.
is going to compound. So the quicker we start there,
Yeah.
there is a better chance of delivering value on both these dimensions. And that's where digital comes in, because unless and until you have discipline on digital, you cannot deliver on both together.
Yeah. Yeah. Super. Thank you, Shashwat. And I could be with you for the rest of the afternoon. But I'm sure you have other things planned in your agenda. It was really, really awesome to learn from you. Always a great inspiration for me personally, and I think for all of us who are here listening to your insights and your advice. So thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks, Esther. You have been very kind, and you are very kind here making these comments. But it's a true partnership. Both the teams have worked together. We have built this, and hopefully, this is foundation as we go deeper and deeper every year going forward. So, look forward to doing way more of this. And thanks for your time and great insightful questions.
Super. Thank you very much, Ashad. Looking forward as well. All
Thank you.
right. So thank
Bye.
you all of you as well for the amazing questions. You really, really took us out of script today with your amazing and insightful questions. Thank you very much for all of you joining us. And again, inviting the team at People Matters, if you could just again put the report on the comments box. And a big shout out to both Darwinbox team and People Matters for putting this amazing work together. And as Shashat said, looking forward being able to do this for the community as well. So we're very grateful once again to the Darwinbox team, and just very, very quickly to share with you our partnership with Darwinbox as a leading provider in cloud-based HR management software, and they serve over 800 organizations with more than 2.2 million employees across 116 countries, and really an amazing journey of growth, and today being recognized as one of number one customer choice HCM by Gartner globally. So congratulations, Darwinbox team, for the amazing impact that you're doing. So that's the wrap for today's session. Stay tuned and looking forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther. Thanks, everyone.